Good evening with Alaska Weather. I'm David Kramer. As always, please visit our website, weather.gov/Alaska, get any updates to our forecast, check out any watches, warnings, or advisories that we might have out for your area. You can also call our weather info line, 1-800-472-0391, getting updates to the forecast through that means as well. You can also email me at the address at the bottom of the screen, david.kramer@noaa.gov. Starting off, we'll take a quick look at the warnings that we do have out for the state down in the west coast and up through much of the interior and into the Brooks Range. We do have quite a few advisories and warnings. Now, primarily, these are winter weather advisories for snow and blowing snow and winter storm warnings for snow and blowing snow. The majority of these along the west coast and into western places of the interior are going to last until Monday morning, and then in the central and eastern parts of the interior lasting until Monday afternoon. Now, one of the exceptions is up by Kaktovik, where the winter weather advisory for snow and blowing snow will begin tonight and then last until Tuesday morning. So again, for specific details about the timing and amounts of snow and how much blowing snow or timing of the blowing snow, please check the website weather.gov/Alaska and click on your area for the details. We also have some coastal flood advisories out around the Norton Sound area on the eastern side of Norton Sound and on the northern side, and these are going to continue to be out until 6 a.m. on Monday. Again, you can check your website if you're in those areas, weather.gov/Alaska, and check out details for the coastal flood advisories as well. For our satellite imagery, we can see the low pressure system that is over the northwestern part of the state now that is bringing in a lot of the cloud cover and train of moisture that's bringing a lot of this snow to mainland Alaska and starting to bring some of those blowing snow conditions as well. As we look out over the western portions of the Bering Sea, we can see a weaker low pushing through the area, bringing some cloud cover over the western and eventually central Aleutian Islands. Down out over south central Alaska, not as much in terms of cloud cover and not as much in terms of precipitation as well. And then finally, we'll look out towards southeast Alaska, where we can see an upper level disturbance moving closer and closer towards the area, starting to bring some cloud cover towards the end of our loop. Taking a look now at the weather for the remainder of the day, we can see that troughing moving through the Gulf right now, currently bringing some snow and a mix of rain and snow to the coastline of the North Gulf Coast, headed towards southeast, but not making it there for the remainder of today. As we look out over mainland Alaska, we can see our low pressure stretched out over much of the western and northern parts of the state, bringing in a lot of moisture and a lot of snow with that moisture to areas from the Bristol Bay Area up through the west coast, where we're starting to see a mix towards the blowing snow as well as the snow, and some blowing snow and snow conditions throughout much of the interior, Brooks Range, and eventually up to the Arctic coastline, where we're seeing additional snow there as well. As we look out over the Bering, we can see some more shower activity as we have some snow showers through much of the northern and central portions of the Bering. But as we get further to the south, still some warm air underneath that is bringing a mix of rain and snow to the western and Aleutian Islands and some rain to the Alaska Peninsula. High pressure building in from the southwest of the area. As we look into tonight, that high is going to push in over the western Aleutian Islands, helping to move our frontal system over the Bering further to the east, bringing snow now to the central Aleutian Islands. So look over mainland Alaska, however, our low pressure continuing to stay over the area for much of the northwestern part of the state and up to the Arctic coastline as well, bringing in continued moisture and snow for places all around Bristol Bay, up along the west coast and into the central and northern parts of the state as well. And along that west coast, we are going to still see the stronger winds coming down with that colder air being pulled in from the north behind that troughing that's out over the Norton Sound area for the tonight map. And then as we look in south central Alaska, a lot of that precipitation getting held up in the mountainous terrain. We'll see our highest snow amounts in areas at higher elevation. And then as we drop down to the Panhandle area, we're going to see some snow in the more northern locations and out by Yakutat as well. But as we get further to the south, we're going to see that mix of rain and snow with the warmer air further closer towards the Gulf of Alaska and further southern locations. As we move into Monday, similar setup for the Panhandle area, continuing to have flow off of the Gulf, bringing snow to more northern and interior locations, higher elevations as well. And as we get closer towards the Gulf and to southern locations, we are going to see more rain. As we look out over mainland Alaska, still going to see quite a bit of snow, not as heavy as we are seeing today, but lingering snow showers from low pressure and that northwesterly flow throughout much of the state. A little bit of protection again in south central Alaska due to the mountains blocking some of the snow activity from reaching the low-lying areas of south central. Then we can see our low that was pushing across the southern Bering overnight that is now pushed into the southeastern portions of the Bering, bringing a mix of rain and snow to the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula and starting to bring another round of snow to southwest Alaska. High pressure that was over the western Aleutians pushing more over the eastern Aleutians, helping to shunt off the precipitation further to the east and helping to bring in more of the colder air over the Bering Sea. On Tuesday, that high is going to get pushed down and flattened out a little bit as it moves just to the south of the central and eastern Aleutians, with another low riding over the top of that, bringing some snow to the central part of the Bering that's going to drive into the Pribilof Islands as well. And a new system coming up from the west, bringing some rain and more warm air to the western Aleutian Islands. Out over mainland Alaska, some isolated showers are going to remain in a weak flow pattern throughout much of the interior and up along the Arctic coastline, down into some areas of the Bristol Bay area as well. Another system coming up from the North Pacific towards the Gulf of Alaska, starting to bring some snow to Kodiak Island, but not pushing into any of our Gulf coastline areas as of yet on Tuesday. However, we will have some lingering showers out over the Panhandle and Yakutat areas that are going to transition to rain as we get closer towards the Gulf and further to the south. Taking a look now at our temperatures, we'll start off in southeast Alaska. Temperatures for Monday morning dropping down into the lower to mid 30s, with Yakutat getting a little bit colder down to 29 degrees. Out in south central Alaska, temperatures are going to drop into the mid 20s, unless you're along the North Gulf Coast, where temperatures are only going to drop to the upper 20s for Cordova, dropping down to 28 degrees. Kodiak dropping down to 32, and colder in the Copper River Basin down to 19 degrees. Single digits for much of the interior. Some areas like Fairbanks are going to drop down to 12 degrees, staying a little bit warmer, and Delta Junction down to 10 degrees, Northway also down to 10. As we move up to the north, staying in the single digits for the most part, Arctic Village, coldest in the state, dropping down to -5 for Monday morning, and then single digits all along the Arctic coastline with the exception of Kaktovik, staying in the double digits at 11. Down in the Kotzebue Sound area, dropping down to single digits. Kotzebue itself is going to drop down to 6 degrees. Point Hope down to 1. Gamble also down to a single degree. And then in the rest of Norton Sound area, single digits, and getting into the lower teens as we move into the Kuskokwim Delta area, and then right around 20 degrees for the Bristol Bay area, with Dillingham and King Salmon both dropping down to 20. Down in the Alaska Peninsula, right around 30 degrees is expected, in the lower 30s for the remainder of the Aleutian Islands, with St. Paul dropping down to 25 degrees. Monday afternoon, getting up into the upper 30s for the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula. A little bit colder still for the Bristol Bay area, getting up just above freezing to 33 degrees for King Salmon and Dillingham. Into the 20s for the YK Delta area, but as we get closer towards Norton Sound, only getting up into the lower teens. Then for Nome, getting up to 10 degrees and single-digit highs for the Kotzebue Sound area. Up along the Arctic coastline, western locations in the single digits, but eastern locations getting up into the teens, and Kaktovik getting up to 20 degrees. Down in the interior, expecting most places to get to around 20 degrees, a little bit warmer in the eastern locations, a little bit colder in the west, with Galena getting up to 18 degrees. Into the mid-30s for much of south central Alaska, a little bit warmer again along the North Gulf Coast, and then down in southeast getting up to right around 40 degrees, with Sitka getting up to 39 degrees in Ketchikan, a little bit warmer there, 43 degrees expected high Monday afternoon. Tuesday morning low temps dropping back down into the mid-20s for most locations in southeast, a little bit warmer to the south, a little bit colder up north by Haines and Skagway, getting up to around 17, or getting down to around 17 degrees. Into the teens for much of south central, 20s along the North Gulf Coast, and in the interior part of the state, single digits to some areas dropping just below zero. Arctic Village, again, the coldest in the state at -6, with the exception, I guess, of Wainwright, that will drop down to -7. Below zero for much of the Arctic coastline and for the Kotzebue Sound area, Norton Sound right around 0 degrees, and single digits for much of the YK Delta. Down into the teens for the Bristol Bay area, and then 20s to right around 30 for the Alaska Peninsula and Aleutian Islands, right about at freezing. A little bit colder at the Pribilof Islands with some of that northerly flow, dropping down to 22 degrees. Highs for Tuesday afternoon in the upper 30s for the Aleutians, mid 30s for the Bristol Bay area, into the 20s and the teens then as we get closer towards the Norton Sound, and single-digit highs all along the Arctic coastline, into the teens to mid 20s for the interior, and into the 30s for much of South Central, and right around 40 degrees for the Panhandle.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
For aviation, we'll start off with a look at our flying weather Monday morning. Out over the Bering Sea, we have some MVFR conditions that extend down to the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. Out over mainland Alaska, we have an area of IFR that stretches from northern portions of southwest Alaska into the interior and along the west coast up to northwestern portions of the state, with some MVFR conditions in the eastern portions of the interior down into south central Alaska and other areas of southwest Alaska. Down in the Panhandle area, primarily MVFR, but we do have some areas of IFR as well as we get further inland. And moving into Monday afternoon, primarily MVFR for the Panhandle area. Some continued MVFR conditions for northern portions of south central Alaska, and then some IFR conditions in the interior that extend up to central portions of the Arctic coastline. Down the west coast of the state, MVFR conditions are expected, and we are going to have some MVFR conditions and isolated areas of VFR conditions down in southwest Alaska, MVFR conditions for the Bering Sea and eastern Aleutian Islands. As we move into Tuesday morning, widespread MVFR through the Bering and Aleutians, with some areas of MVFR for southwest Alaska that extend up the west coast and throughout all of the interior. Up on the Arctic coastline, expecting IFR conditions to persist, and then primarily VFR for south central Alaska, and then MVFR for the Panhandle. Moving into Tuesday afternoon, primarily VFR for the Panhandle area, northern locations, expecting to see some areas of MVFR. Primarily VFR conditions for south central Alaska, with the Alaska Range seeing some MVFR, and then some isolated areas of MVFR for the interior. Arctic coastline clearing out, primarily VFR conditions expected, as well as along the west coast and down in southwest Alaska. For the Bering Sea, central and western locations, going to see some MVFR conditions. Then for the central and western Aleutian Islands, we are going to see some MVFR with some IFR approaching with another system moving in Tuesday afternoon. Looking at the passes, starting up north, AKwx Pass, expecting to be IFR all day on Monday, as well as Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will both start off IFR and then improve to marginal conditions in the afternoon. Rainy Pass also expecting to be IFR throughout the day, as well as Windy Pass. Isabel Pass should be marginal throughout the day on Monday. Mentasta Pass also expected to have marginal conditions on Monday, and Tanita Pass also going to be MVFR. For Portage, VFR conditions are expected, and Chilkoot and White will both start off IFR and then improve to marginal conditions in the afternoon. Taking a look at our freezing levels, surface freezing line riding through the Panhandle area, then along the North Gulf Coast and Kodiak Island, out into the southern and central parts of the Bering Sea, and then off by the western Aleutians. An area of warmer air approaching the Panhandle area with heights up to as high as 8,000 feet for freezing levels. Icing, starting off in the Panhandle area, expecting to be below 9,000 feet, extending through Yakutat area and eastern portions of south central Alaska. Along the Arctic coastline and areas through Kotzebue Sound area, we are expecting below 10,000 feet. That will drop to below 4,000 feet as we get further down the west coast. And then below 4,000 feet for central and eastern portions of the Bering Sea and Aleutian Islands, places along the Alaska Peninsula and into the Bristol Bay area below 4,000 feet also. For our jet stream, we do have the main portion of the jet riding through the northern and central portions of the Bering Sea, or of the Gulf of Alaska, 150 to 160 miles per hour, extending out of that westerly direction, moving then over the Panhandle area. A little bit weaker out over the western portions of the Bering Sea, around 90 knots there, out of 90 miles per hour out of that westerly direction. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, staying out over the Bering Sea, westerly flow is expected, 35 to 50 miles per hour, diving down over the eastern Aleutian Islands, dropping back down to the 35 mile per hour range, and a stronger portion of the 9,000 foot winds out over southwest Alaska out of a northwesterly direction, 45, and then jumping up to 70 miles per hour, extending out of that westerly direction out over the southeastern portions of the state, around 70 miles per hour there, dropping down to 55. Another branch of stronger winds is out over the interior portion of the state, driving through the Fairbanks area, 35 to 40 miles per hour, still out of that westerly direction. Taking us down to 3,000 feet Out over mainland Alaska, still primarily westerly flow for most locations. Up along the Arctic coastline around 40 miles per hour. A lull near the Brooks Range, but then picking back up over the interior around 45 miles per hour out of that westerly direction. Stronger winds gusting through some of the gaps by the Barren Islands and Kodiak Island, getting up to as high as 50 miles per hour. Staying out of that westerly direction, headed out over the Panhandle area, 35 to 50 miles per hour expected there. Out over the Bering Sea, we're going to see some westerly winds in the 25 to 30 mile per hour range, picking up by the Pribilof Islands around 45 miles per hour. Forward turbulence around much of the interior and southwest Alaska, below 5 to 6,000 feet there.
On March 11, 2011, a powerful tsunami hit Japan, destroying cities and villages. As the water receded back into the ocean, it pulled what remained of buildings, cars, boats, and homes along with it. Scrap metals, plastics, and objects of all shapes and sizes either sank near the shore or floated away. In the days that followed, large masses of floating debris could easily be seen by satellite imagery and aerial photos. In the wake of this disaster, NOAA is assessing the potential impact that the debris may have on U.S. shores. So, where will this debris go, and when will it get there? To help answer those questions, scientists are using computer models to estimate the debris' path, using its starting location in the tsunami zone and historical weather and ocean conditions. The findings are that some debris could pass near or wash ashore in the northwestern Hawaiian Islands as early as this winter. Debris may also approach the west coast of the United States in 2013 and potentially circle back to the main Hawaiian Islands in 2014. But scientists caution that there are limitations to what computer models can tell us, now that the debris has moved out of satellite view. And with currents and winds in the Pacific constantly changing, there is no guarantee that the debris will stay on the predicted path. Items will sink along the way, or break up and disperse in many directions. Despite these unknowns, NOAA and its partners are collecting data, assessing possible impacts, and making preparations in case debris does wash ashore. The 2011 tsunami in Japan reminds us that the devastation that happens on land can also become a marine debris issue at sea.
Imagine all of this underwater. In a major tsunami, it could happen. In this part of Washington state, it's happened before, hundreds of years ago. Sometime in the future, it will likely happen again. But we can be ready. If a tsunami strikes, this school will provide a place for people to ride it out above the waves.
We're in Westport, Washington, and right behind me is the very first tsunami vertical evacuation center in the United States.
This is an emergency. Please walk to the nearest exit. Go to the stair tower and proceed up the stairs.
Tsunamis are a potential hazard for low-lying coastal areas. That's why many coastal communities have plans in place to get people to safety, high ground or inland, where they can be beyond the reach of a tsunami. Often there are signs showing where to go and where to gather. Most tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes along subduction zones, where two of Earth's plates collide and one is forced under the other. Westport and other Pacific Northwest coastal communities are especially at risk because one of these zones lies just offshore. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. An earthquake here caused a tsunami in 1700 that flooded shores as far away as Japan. Experts say it's just a matter of time before it happens again. Since the subduction zone is so close, a tsunami like the one in 1700 could strike before people in some low-lying areas could get to high ground or inland. And Westport doesn't have a lot of high ground or easy routes inland.
If we get an earthquake or a tsunami, we're going to get a lot of water in the area really quickly, and we needed a place to go. So our community built this brand new school, and above our gym and cafeteria, we have a roof. And so the idea is that we'll get all of our students up, and anybody from the community who needs to get up, they can get up there as well.
Ocosta Elementary School might seem like a normal school, but look more closely. It's engineered to withstand monster waves. Tsunami vertical evacuation shelters must be able to resist the powerful forces that a tsunami brings. Hydrodynamic, buoyant, hydrostatic, and debris impact forces and strong currents. They're also designed to help people get to safety quickly.
There are 4 big staircases on each corner of the building, and each one of those staircases is 8 feet wide, and we can get the whole school evacuated in about 4.5 minutes.
Everybody should be at a 0.
On the roof of the building, there is water and food and buckets and shelters and tarps and blankets and different things so that we can be up there for 2, 3, maybe 4 days while we wait for rescue.
You can go to the top and you know you'll be safe. It feels really nice to have a special building because you feel protected.
This community decided that a tsunami evacuation center was important because they didn't have anywhere to go, and they decided to use their money to build the building. The additional cost is anywhere between 10 and 20% of the actual building cost itself, and that's really a sound investment for a lot of protection. You may be there a while, but you're safe and you're secure, and that's the most important thing.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
For the marine section, we'll start off with a quick look at our ice edge. We do have some polynyas that have formed along the north-facing coastlines from the Bering Sea and some in the Chukchi Sea as well, where we do have some areas of open water. However, as we do have some of the colder air coming back in the next couple days, we do expect some new ice to form in those polynya areas and the potential for some new ice to form along the ice edge as well with that colder air. Taking a look down in southeast Alaska, starting in the inside waters, southerly winds 30 knots gusting to 45 up north, and then as we drop down further to the south, becoming northwesterly around 20 knots. Out over the Gulf, westerly winds 25 knots in the south, getting up to as high as 35 knots as we get further to the north, with seas as high as 18 feet. Then on Tuesday, westerly flow over the Gulf, 20 to 25 knots, dropping down to 15 as we get further to the south. In the inside waters, primarily southeast 15 knots. However, as we get to southern locations, northwesterly winds 15 knots there. For Monday for south central Alaska, primarily westerly flow. Out over the Gulf in northern locations, 35 knots. As we get closer towards the Barren Islands, 40 to 45 knots. In the Cook Inlet area up north, 25 knots, getting up to as high as 40 knots as we get closer to Kamishak Bay. And then in Prince William Sound, northwesterly winds 35 knots. Seas are up to as high as 18 feet in the northern parts of the Gulf. Then on Tuesday, flow diminishing quite a bit, becoming more northerly, around 10 to 15 knots most locations to the east of the Barren Islands, however a little bit stronger there, northeast winds 20 knots. For the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, starting around Kodiak Island, winds out of the west 30 to 35 knots, gusts through some of the gaps and bays and passes, around 50 knots expected there. And as we drop further to the southwest, diminishing down to around 10 to 15 knots out of a westerly direction around the Alaska Peninsula. Then on Tuesday, becoming northwesterly around the peninsula, 20 to 25 knots, seas as high as 12 feet on the Bering side. Becoming more northerly as we move towards the Bristol Bay area, 10 knots there, and then around 10 to 20 knots around Kodiak Island with a north to east wind. Then on Monday for the Aleutian Islands, starting off with the eastern Aleutians, southwesterly winds 15 to 20 knots, becoming northwesterly for the central Aleutians, 20 to 25 knots. And then as we get closer towards the western Aleutians, swinging back around to southeasterly winds around 15 knots there. For Tuesday, 25 knots out of a southeast direction for the western Aleutians, 9 feet for seas. And as we move back further to the east, we're going to see some anticyclonic flow, resulting in winds around 15 knots that are going to circulate, becoming more northwesterly as we get closer towards the eastern Aleutians, and 25 knots expected for areas further to the east. Along the west coast of the state, starting off in the Norton Sound area, westerly winds 25 knots expected. Variable winds 10 to 15 knots for much of the west coast, but then as we get down towards the Pribilof Islands, southwesterly winds 30 knots with seas as high as 9 feet. For Tuesday, winds becoming more westerly as we get up into the Norton Sound area, around 5 knots there, 15 knots out of a southwesterly direction for much of the west coast, but becoming northerly on the southern side of Nunavik Island, 20 knots there, St. Matthew Island, southerly 20 knots, and then the Pribilof Islands, westerly 15 knots. Up along the Arctic coastline, starting way out east by the Beaufort Sea, westerly winds 20 to 25 knots, becoming northerly as we push further to the west, around 20 knots. The northwesterly flow 20 to 25 knots down much of the northwest coastline, Bering Strait area around 15 knots. Then on Tuesday, flow becoming more southerly, 15 to 20 knots along the northwest coast, and then westerly winds 20 to 30 knots along the Arctic coastline, strongest as we get further to the east. For the remainder of tonight, we will have quite a bit of snowfall throughout much of mainland Alaska. Some blowing snow conditions expected as well for some areas along the west coast, interior part of the state, and up in the Brooks Range. We do have multiple winter weather advisories for snow and blowing snow, and several winter storm warnings for snow and blowing snow throughout those same locations. We do expect many of those to last until Monday morning. However, some in the central and eastern parts of the interior we are expecting to last through much of the day on Monday. Check the weather.gov/Alaska for further details for your location. Down in the southern portions of the state, southwest Alaska will also see some snow, and then some isolated areas of snow throughout south central, then some snow for northern locations of the Panhandle, mixing with rain as we get to southern locations of the Panhandle, and another weaker system moving through the southern part of the Bering Sea, bringing snow to the Pribilof Islands and central Aleutians. As we move into Monday, that system is going to push off further to the east, continuing to bring snow for the Pribilofs, but also bringing some warmer air to areas of the eastern Aleutians, and for the Alaska Peninsula, a mix of rain and snow is expected. Lingering snow over much of mainland Alaska, expected to be a little bit lighter than on Sunday, but we will still have snow throughout much of the day on Monday for the mainland and along the Arctic coastline. Isolated areas of snow showers for south central Alaska, and snow for northern locations of the Panhandle, mixing with rain as we get further to the south.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.